Dust rises like ghosts from the cracked earth, swirling around weathered boots that haven't retreated from any fight until now. The farm stretches before him, a battlefield of dying crops and fading legacy. 5 generations of history written in soil that no longer yields to hope. They say you can't fight the weather, can't fight progress, can't fight the banks that turn family histories into balance sheet calculations. But they don't know what he knows, that some wars aren't fought with bullets, but with patience, that sometimes the enemy wears custom suits instead of enemy uniforms, that the most dangerous adversaries are those who've never faced consequences. In the distance, a black sedan approaches another suit with another offer too insulting to be called fair. Another piece of the conspiracy closing in around what little remains. The drought may have weakened the land, but it has hardened the man. And as he watches corporate vultures circle what his family bled to build, one truth crystallizes with lethal clarity. They've mistaken his honor for weakness, a mistake no one has survived twice. The first hint of dawn stretched across the eastern sky as Jack Harmon guided his ancient John Deere tractor down the uneven rows of withered corn. At 52, his body protested each jolt and vibration with reminders of old wounds, both visible and hidden. 22 years in the Army's Delta Force had taught him to ignore pain, but the land showed no such resilience. 3 years of drought had transformed the once fertile fields of Willow Creek into a dust-plagued reminder of what they'd lost. He cut the engine, the sudden silence broken only by the distant cawing of crows. Stepping down from the tractor, Jack surveyed what remained of the Harmon legacy, 5 generations of stubborn determination carved into 380 acres of Midwestern soil. Now it was just him, a stack of foreclosure notices, and 60 days to perform a miracle. Talking to the corn again, Martha Reeves called from the edge of the field. At 78, she moved with the careful precision of someone who'd earned every creak in her joints. She'd been the Harmon family housekeeper since before Jack was born, and now she was all the family he had left. "Crops don't talk back," Jack replied, accepting the thermos she offered. "Unlike bankers." Robert Kennedy called again. "Says he needs to see you about the—" She hesitated, unwilling to speak the word they both feared. "Foreclosure," Jack finished for her. "Might as well call it what it is. Your brother would have wanted—" "Michael's not here," Jack cut her off, his tone sharper than intended. "And we both know why." Martha's eyes softened with understanding. The official report called it suicide. Michael Harmon, found in his pickup truck with a self-inflicted gunshot wound 6 months ago, the day after Black River Financial had called in the farm's loans. Jack had returned from his security contractor job in the Middle East to bury his younger brother and face the catastrophe Michael had left behind. A sound sliced through the morning stillness, distant at first, then unmistakable. A scream. Jack's body responded before his mind fully registered the sound, military instincts kicking in as he sprinted toward his weathered Jeep. The scream had come from the direction of Eagles Point, a jagged cliff formation that marked the northern boundary of Harmon land. "Call Sheriff Davis," he shouted to Martha as the Jeep roared to life. The dirt track to Eagles Point was barely passable, eroded by the same flash floods that had alternated with drought over the past 3 seasons. Jack navigated it at dangerous speed, each second measured against the possibility of a life hanging in the balance. As he rounded the final bend, he caught sight of a luxury SUV parked haphazardly near the cliff edge, its driver's door flung open. Jack grabbed his emergency kit from behind the seat rope, first aid supplies, and the tactical flashlight he'd never stopped carrying, and raced toward the cliff. The screaming had stopped, which worried him more than its continuation would have. "Hello," he called, approaching the edge cautiously. "Anyone down there?" "Help!" The voice was female, strained with fear and effort. "I'm slipping," dropping to his stomach. Jack crawled the final few feet to peer over the edge. 60 feet below, the jagged rocks of the creek bed waited like open jaws. Halfway down, a woman clung to a narrow outcropping, her knuckles white with effort, one hiking boot dangling precariously over the abyss. "Hold on," Jack called, quickly assessing the situation with the calm efficiency that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. "I'm going to throw down a rope." The woman looked up, her face pale against the dark rock face. She was in her late 40s, Jack guessed, with short dark hair now matted with sweat and dust. There was something oddly familiar about her, though he was certain they'd never met. "Hurry," she managed, her voice tight with strain. "The rock is crumbling." Jack worked quickly, securing one end of the rope to the Jeep's tow hitch before looping the middle around his waist in a makeshift harness. He'd performed similar rescues in Afghanistan, extracting wounded soldiers from mountain positions under enemy fire. This should have been simpler, but the drought had weakened the cliff face, making the entire operation dangerously unstable. "I'm coming down," he called, beginning his controlled descent. "Just keep holding on." The woman didn't respond, saving her energy for the more critical task of maintaining her grip. As Jack worked his way down, loose stones cascaded around him, some striking his shoulders and back. He ignored the pain, focusing only on reaching her before her strength gave out. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep her engaged as he navigated the treacherous descent. "Eleanor," she managed between labored breaths. "Eleanor Montgomery." The name meant nothing to Jack. "Tourist?" he asked, noticing her expensive hiking gear. A grim laugh escaped her. "Something like that." Jack was close enough now to see the blood on her hands where the sharp rock had cut into her palms. Her right shoulder was at an awkward angle, possibly dislocated in the fall. Her expensive hiking clothes were torn and dust-covered, but quality equipment had likely saved her life. "I'm going to swing over to you," he explained, calculating the trajectory. "When I reach you, grab onto me, not the rope. Understand?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes never leaving his face, studying him with an intensity that seemed misplaced given their circumstances. Jack pushed off from the cliff face, swinging in a controlled arc toward her position. As he neared, a sickening crack echoed through the ravine. The outcropping supporting Eleanor had begun to give way. "Now!" Jack shouted, extending his arm. Eleanor lunged toward him just as her foothold disintegrated. For one heart-stopping moment, she was in free fall, then Jack's hand closed around her wrist. The sudden weight jerked them both downward, the rope burning through Jack's gloves as they slid several feet before he managed to arrest their descent. Pain lanced through his shoulder, an old injury from Fallujah, screaming in protest, but his grip remained iron. Eleanor's eyes, wide with fear and pain, locked onto his. "I've got you," he said with quiet certainty. "I won't let go." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection formed in crisis, forged in the space between life and death. Then practicality took over as Jack secured her to his harness. "Can you climb?" he asked, noting how she favored her right arm. "Yes," she said with determination that impressed him. "Let's get out of here." The ascent was grueling. Jack bore most of Eleanor's weight, his muscles burning with the effort as they inched upward. Halfway up, another section of cliff face crumbled, sending a shower of rocks down on them. Jack twisted his body to shield Eleanor, a sharp pain exploding across his back as a sizable rock struck him between the shoulder blades. "You're hurt," Eleanor observed, her voice steadier now despite their precarious position. "Had worse paper cuts," Jack grunted, resuming their climb. When they finally reached the top, Jack pulled Eleanor onto solid ground before collapsing beside her, both of them gasping for breath. For several minutes, they simply lay there, the reality of survival washing over them. "Thank you," Eleanor finally said, her voice rough with emotion and exertion. "That was—" She trailed off, words inadequate for what had transpired. Jack nodded, pushing himself to a seated position to examine her injuries. "Shoulders dislocated," he confirmed. "Need to set it before the swelling gets worse." "You a doctor as well as a mountain rescue expert?" she asked, a hint of dry humor emerging despite her pain. "Army medic, among other things," Jack replied, not elaborating. "This will hurt." "I'm familiar with pain," she said simply, then nodded her consent. Jack positioned himself behind her. On three, one. In one swift motion, he rotated her shoulder back into its socket. Eleanor's sharp gasp was the only indication of the considerable pain she must have felt. No screaming, no cursing. Jack found himself impressed by her composure. "You said 3, she observed once she'd caught her breath. "Anticipation makes it worse," he explained, retrieving his first aid kit to clean the lacerations on her hands. "Military habit," she asked, watching him work with efficient movements. Jack didn't answer, focusing instead on the task at hand. "What were you doing up here alone?" he asked. "These cliffs are dangerous even when we're not in drought conditions." Eleanor hesitated. "I was hiking. Wanted to see the sunrise from Eagle's Point." The explanation sounded rehearsed, but Jack didn't push. "Long way from the hiking trails," he observed instead. Before she could respond, the rumble of approaching vehicles drew their attention. A gleaming black Suburban with tinted windows skidded to a halt beside Eleanor's SUV, followed by Sheriff Davis's patrol car. 4 men in dark suits erupted from the Suburban, their stances and alertness immediately identifying them to Jack as security personnel. "Ms. Montgomery." The lead security officer rushed forward, hand hovering near what Jack suspected was a concealed weapon. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Richardson," Eleanor replied, her demeanor subtly shifting back, straightening, voice taking on an authoritative edge that hadn't been present moments before. "Thanks to Mr. Harmon," Jack supplied, suddenly wary of the change in dynamics. "Jack Harmon." Sheriff Davis approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "Got Martha's call. Looks like you handled things before I could get here." "Mrs. Montgomery had a fall," Jack explained, gathering his medical supplies. "Dislocated shoulder, some cuts. Should get proper medical attention." "We have a private physician on call," Richardson interjected, helping Eleanor to her feet with a protective attentiveness that spoke of more than professional obligation. Eleanor winced as she stood, but quickly composed herself. "Mr. Harmon saved my life," she told Richardson. "Make sure he's properly compensated." Jack stiffened. "Not necessary." "I insist," Eleanor said, reaching for her purse that Richardson had retrieved from her vehicle. "What you did wasn't for sale," Jack interrupted, his tone final. He turned to Sheriff Davis. "Can you make sure Miss Montgomery gets medical attention? I need to get back to work." Eleanor studied him with undisguised curiosity. "Most people would accept a reward." "I'm not most people," Jack replied, turning to leave. "And human life shouldn't have a price tag." As he walked back to his Jeep, Jack felt Eleanor's eyes following him. Something about the entire situation felt off, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. The farm's problems were waiting, and unlike Eleanor Montgomery's gratitude, they couldn't be walked away from. Eleanor Montgomery watched Jack Harmon's Jeep disappear down the dirt road, dust billowing in its wake like a physical manifestation of her confusion. In 20 years of running Montgomery Agritech, she'd encountered every type of person the business world could produce: sycophants and sharks, innovators and imitators, but Jack Harmon defied easy categorization. "Ma'am, we should get you to a doctor," Richardson urged, hovering anxiously at her elbow. "In a moment," Eleanor replied, her attention still fixed on the vanishing dust cloud. "Sheriff, what can you tell me about Jack Harmon?" Sheriff Davis's expression grew guarded. "Good man. Served his country with distinction. Came back to save the family farm after his brother's passing." "Passing," Eleanor prompted, noting the careful word choice. Davis exchanged a look with Richardson. "Suicide, 6 months ago. Jack was overseas when it happened. Security contractor in the Middle East." Eleanor absorbed this information, pieces falling into place. "And the farm struggling, like most around here," Davis said with the resignation of someone who'd witnessed too many similar stories. "Black River's been aggressive with their foreclosures. Jack's got about 2 months left, from what I hear." "Black River Financial?" Eleanor's attention sharpened. "Robert Kennedy's operation." Davis nodded, surprise flickering across his features. "You know Kennedy. Our paths have crossed." Eleanor said vaguely, then winced as pain lanced through her shoulder. That's enough questions, Richardson interrupted. Dr. Matthews is waiting at the hotel. Eleanor allowed herself to be guided to the Suburban, her mind already racing with connections and possibilities. Jack Harmon intrigued her in a way few people had in recent years. A decorated soldier who'd returned to fight a different kind of battle, one he appeared to be losing. Richardson, she said as they pulled away, I want everything you can find on Jack Harmon and his farm, and set up a meeting with Robert Kennedy. Richardson frowned. Ma'am, we're here to assess potential acquisitions for Montgomery Agritech. Not, I'm well aware of why we're here. Eleanor cut him off. Consider this part of my due diligence. As they drove through Willow Creek, Eleanor observed the familiar signs of rural decline, empty storefronts, faded signs, a once vibrant main street now dotted with for sale notices. It was a scene she'd witnessed in dozens of agricultural communities across the Midwest, each one ripe for Montgomery Agritech's particular brand of revitalization. The company her father had founded had grown from a small agricultural supply business into a behemoth that reshaped rural America. Montgomery's advanced farming systems, proprietary seeds, and data-driven approach had revolutionized modern agriculture and made Eleanor one of the wealthiest women in the country. It had also made her one of the most isolated, 2 failed marriages, strained relationships with her adult children, and the constant pressure of leading a Fortune 500 company had left her with material success but little personal fulfillment. At 48, Eleanor found herself at the pinnacle of professional achievement and the nadir of personal satisfaction. Perhaps that explained her morning hike, a rare moment of solitude away from security teams and executive assistants. It didn't explain why she'd been photographing Jack Harmon's farm from Eagles Point when the cliff had given way beneath her. Ma'am, Richardson interrupted her thoughts as they pulled into the hotel parking lot. I should inform you that the board has called twice. They're expecting updates on the Willow Creek acquisition. Eleanor nodded absently. Tell them I'm conducting personal reconnaissance. What she didn't say was that her encounter with Jack Harmon had shaken something loose inside her, a question she couldn't yet formulate, but felt compelled to answer. 3 days after the cliff rescue, Jack sat across from Robert Kennedy in the Black River financial office. The foreclosure notice spread between them like a declaration of war. Kennedy was 40, Yale-educated, with the polished appearance of someone who'd never worked a day outside climate control. His family had owned the bank for generations, but Robert was the first Kennedy to treat it as a weapon rather than a community institution. The terms are quite clear, Mr. Harmon, Kennedy said, tapping a manicured finger on the document. Your brother took out substantial loans against the property. The payment schedule hasn't been met for 3 consecutive quarters. Because of the drought, Jack countered, controlling his temper with military discipline. You know every farm in the county is struggling, which is precisely why we need to mitigate our risk, Kennedy replied smoothly. Black River has shareholders to consider. Jack leaned forward. My family has banked here for 5 generations. My grandfather helped your grandfather keep this place afloat during the Depression. Ancient history, Kennedy dismissed with a wave. Business is business. Is that what you told my brother before he put a gun to his head? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Kennedy's expression flickered discomfort, perhaps guilt, quickly masked by professional detachment. Your brother's choices were his own, Kennedy finally said. Black River offered standard terms considering the risk factors. 22% interest isn't standard, Jack said quietly. It's predatory. Kennedy gathered the papers, signaling the end of the meeting. You have 60 days to bring the loan current, Mr. Harmon. Otherwise, the property goes to auction. His practiced smile returned. Though I understand there may already be interested buyers, Jack's jaw tightened. What buyers? I'm not at liberty to say, Kennedy replied with manufactured regret. Banking confidentiality. As Jack stood to leave, Kennedy added, there is another option. Sell now, While you still have some control over the process, I could arrange meetings with several interested parties. The Harmon farm isn't for sale, Jack stated flatly. Kennedy's smile turned condescending. Everything's for sale, Mr. Harmon. It's just a question of price and timing. Outside in the June heat, Jack paused on the sidewalk, allowing the anger to wash through him without taking control. 22 years of military discipline had taught him to channel emotion rather than be ruled by it. Right now, that emotion was telling him something wasn't right about Kennedy's eagerness to foreclose or about these mysterious, interested buyers. His phone buzzed with a text from Martha. Sheriff Davis called. Said to check your north field. More trouble. Perfect, Jack muttered, heading for his truck. The trouble turned out to be a broken irrigation pipe, water gushing onto already saturated ground while the rest of his fields remained dust dry. The damage wasn't accidental. Tool marks showed where someone had deliberately ruptured the line. Third incident this month, Sheriff Davis observed, crouching beside Jack to examine the pipe. First the cut fences, then the equipment tampering, now this. Someone's sending a message, Jack said, already calculating the repair costs he couldn't afford. Question is, who? Davis stood, wiping his hands on his uniform pants. Any ideas? Jack thought of Kennedy's smug expression. Few possibilities. Well, add another to your list, Davis said, nodding toward the road where a black sedan had pulled to a stop. Been seeing that car around your property last couple days? Jack recognized the vehicle, immediately same model as the security team that had retrieved Eleanor Montgomery from the cliff. As they watched, the driver raised what appeared to be a camera with a telephoto lens. Want me to have a word? Davis offered. I'll handle it, Jack replied, already striding toward the sedan. The driver spotted Jack's approach and hurriedly started the engine. Jack broke into a run, but the sedan accelerated away, kicking up a plume of dust as it sped down the rural road. Got the plate, Davis called, jotting it down in his notebook. I'll run it, but I'm guessing it's a rental. Jack stared after the retreating vehicle, a suspicion forming. Eleanor Montgomery, he said aloud. Find out what she's really doing in Willow Creek. Davis raised an eyebrow. The woman you rescued, what would she want with your farm? That's what I intend to find out. The Willow Creek Diner hadn't changed its decor since the 1970s. A fact its owner, Betty Williams, mentioned with pride at least once to every customer. At 74, Betty had become the unofficial historian of the community. Her diner the gathering place where information flowed as freely as the coffee. Eleanor sat in a corner booth, a baseball cap and sunglasses providing minimal disguise as she nursed her third cup of coffee. Richardson would have a fit if he knew she'd slipped away from the hotel without security, but she needed to understand Willow Creek without the filter of her corporate position. More coffee, hun. Betty appeared beside the table, coffee pot in hand. Please. Eleanor smiled, genuinely enjoying the woman's no-nonsense demeanor. And maybe some local insight. Betty's eyes twinkled as she refilled the cup. Depends on what you're looking to learn. I'm researching agricultural communities for a book. Eleanor lied smoothly, using the cover story she'd prepared. Particularly interested in how farms like the Harmon place have managed to survive. Betty's expression sobered. Surviving's one thing, thriving's another. Jack's fighting a losing battle out there, between the drought and Black River, circling like vultures. I met Mr. Harmon briefly, Eleanor said carefully. Seemed like a capable man. One of the best, Betty agreed, sliding into the seat opposite Eleanor. Decorated war hero, though he'd never tell you that himself. 3 silver stars, 2 Purple Hearts. Would have been career military if his unit hadn't walked into an ambush in Afghanistan. Lost half his team. Eleanor absorbed this information, adding layers to her understanding of the man who'd pulled her from the cliff. And his brother, I heard there was a tragedy. Betty's face clouded. Michael, sweet boy, not as tough as Jack. When the farm started failing, he took it hard, blamed himself. She lowered her voice. Between us, I never believed it was suicide. Michael wasn't the type, no matter how bad things got. What do you think happened? Eleanor asked, intrigued. Can't say for certain, Betty hedged. But he'd been asking questions about Black River's lending practices. Said he'd found something fishy in their loan documents. Next thing we know, he's dead, and Jack's rushing home from overseas to bury him. The diner's door swung open, conversation halting as Jack Harmon himself entered. Despite the casual setting, his military bearing was unmistakable, alert eyes scanning the room, posture straight but not rigid, awareness of exits and sightlines instinctive rather than calculated. Betty stood quickly. Speak of the devil. Don't tell him I've been gossiping. She moved to greet Jack, affection evident in her manner. Eleanor angled her face away, suddenly self-conscious about her covert research. Through her peripheral vision, she watched Jack interact with the diner's patrons, a nod here, a brief conversation there, respect evident in how the older farmers addressed him. Jack Harmon, as I live and breathe. A booming voice cut through the diner's ambient noise as a heavy-set man in expensive Western wear entered. Just the man I wanted to see. The atmosphere in the diner shifted subtly, conversations quieting, faces turning wary. Eleanor observed the newcomer with interest, noting the Rolex watch and custom boots that suggested prosperity beyond Willow Creek's norm. Victor Chambers, Betty whispered, returning briefly to Eleanor's table. Real estate developer, been buying up foreclosed farms across the county. Jack's expression remained neutral as Chambers approached, though Eleanor detected the slight tension in his shoulders that signaled wariness. Chambers, Jack acknowledged coolly. What brings you to Betty's thought you preferred the country club? Chambers laughed too loudly. Man's got to eat besides. I'm a local boy at heart. He clapped Jack on the shoulder, a gesture that Jack visibly tolerated rather than welcome. Heard about your run-in with Black River yesterday. Kennedy's a hard ass, but he's just doing his job. Was that his job when he set my brother up with predatory loans? Jack's voice remained even, but the diner had gone completely silent now. Everyone listening. Chambers' smile dimmed slightly. Business is tough all over, Jack. Farming's changing. Small operations like yours can't compete with modern agribusiness. So I should just roll over and sell to you, Jack asked, like the Petersons and the Alvarados. I prefer to think of it as a dignified exit strategy, Chambers replied, his joviality strained now. I'm offering fair market value. For land that's been undervalued due to a manufactured crisis, Jack countered. Convenient timing with the drought and Black River's sudden urgency to call in loans. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, intrigued by Jack's implication and Chambers's visible discomfort. There was more happening in Willow Creek than a simple agricultural downturn. Careful, Harmon, Chambers said, voice lowered but still audible in the silent diner. That sounds like an accusation. Just an observation, Jack replied evenly. Interesting how you always seem to know which farms are in trouble before foreclosure notices go public. The tension between the men was palpable, old grievances and new suspicions crackling like static electricity. Eleanor found herself holding her breath, captivated by the quiet intensity of Jack's resistance. Chambers recovered his composure, the salesman's smile returning. My offer stands. Jack, think about it. 60 days isn't much time to work a miracle. He turned to leave, then paused at Eleanor's table, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in her deliberately nondescript appearance. Don't believe we've met. Victor Chambers, Chambers Development. Eleanor nodded politely but offered only a murmured, just passing through, grateful when Betty appeared with a check, creating a distraction that allowed Chambers to move on. As Chambers departed, the diner's normal conversation gradually resumed. Jack remained at the counter, speaking quietly with Betty, who gestured once in Eleanor's direction. Jack's gaze shifted toward her booth, a flicker of recognition crossing his features despite her disguise. Eleanor quickly paid her bill and slipped out the side door, heart inexplicably racing at the near encounter. She was being ridiculous, and she told herself. She was Eleanor Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Agritech, not some corporate spy skulking around in disguise. Except that's exactly what she was doing. And now she needed to understand why. The evening stretched long shadows across the Harmon farmhouse porch as Jack sat cleaning his grandfather's old shotgun, a task that required minimal concentration, but kept his hands busy while his mind worked. Martha moved around the kitchen inside, the familiar sounds of dinner preparation, a counterpoint to the chirping crickets. "Thought I might find you here," Sheriff Davis said, climbing the porch steps with the careful movements of a man whose knees had seen better days. "Got some information on your mystery woman?" Jack set aside the shotgun. "Eleanor Montgomery. More than that," Davis handed over a folder. "Eleanor Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Agritech, one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the world." Jack flipped open the folder, finding himself staring at a professional photograph of the woman he'd pulled from the cliff, now dressed in elegant business attire, her expression confident and commanding. "The Invisible Billionaire," read the Forbes magazine headline. "What's a billionaire CEO doing scouting my failing farm?" Jack wondered aloud. "That's the interesting part." Davis settled into the adjacent rocker. "Montgomery Agritech recently opened a substantial line of credit with Black River Financial. They're planning a major expansion in the region." The pieces clicked into place with disturbing clarity. "They're working with Kennedy to force foreclosures," Jack said. "Buy the land cheap after farmers have been squeezed out." "That's my guess," Davis confirmed. "Though it doesn't explain why Ms. Montgomery was personally photographing your property, or why she's been asking questions about you around town." Jack's brow furrowed. "What kind of questions?" "Betty says she was particularly interested in your military background and Michael's death." Jack absorbed this information silently, the familiar cold focus of operational planning settling over him. In the military, he'd learned to analyze threats, methodically identify capabilities, predict intentions, develop countermeasures. He'd never expected to apply those skills to defending his family farm. "There's something else," Davis added, his expression grave. "Got the lab results back on that irrigation pipe. The tool marks matched those found on Michael's truck, the damage to the brake line that was initially ruled as normal wear and tear." Jack went very still. "You're saying someone tampered with Michael's brakes before the accident?" "I'm saying it's a possibility we can't ignore," Davis replied carefully. "Especially with all these corporate interests suddenly circling your land." Before Jack could respond, Martha appeared at the screen door. "Jack, your daughter's on the phone. Says it's important." Jack hadn't spoken to Rachel in nearly 3 months, not since their argument over her decision to study sustainable agriculture instead of coming home to help with the farm. Their relationship had been strained ever since Jack's return from overseas, his prolonged absence during her childhood, creating a distance neither knew how to bridge. He took the call in his father's old office, the room unchanged since the day Jack had shipped out for basic training 25 years ago. "Rachel," he greeted, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Everything okay?" "No, Dad, everything is not okay." Rachel's voice crackled with frustration. "I just got a call from the financial aid office. My scholarship's been canceled with no explanation." Jack frowned. "Mid-semester? They can't do that." "Apparently they can," Rachel replied. "And without it, I can't register for fall classes. I'm coming home." "Rachel, no," Jack said firmly. "You're a semester away from graduating. We'll figure something out." "With what money, Dad?" she challenged. "I know about the foreclosure. Martha told me." Jack silently cursed Martha's well-intentioned meddling. "I'm handling it." "Like you handled everything while you were off playing hero for 20 years. The words held the bitter edge of old wounds. "I'm coming home. Dad, I'll be there tomorrow." The line went dead before Jack could respond. He set the phone down slowly, Rachel's words echoing in his head. Playing hero, as if the years of service the friends lost The nightmares that still woke him sweating and disoriented had been some kind of game. Davis appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right?" "Rachel's scholarship got canceled," Jack said, the timing raising his suspicions. "She's coming home." "Convenient timing," Davis observed, clearly thinking along the same lines. "Almost like someone's trying to apply pressure from multiple angles." Jack's jaw tightened. "I need to know exactly what Montgomery Agritech wants with my land. And I need to know if they had anything to do with Michael's death." "Careful, Jack," Davis warned. "These are powerful people with resources we can't match." Jack's expression hardened as he glanced at the wall where his service medals hung beside his father's and grandfather's. "They're not the first powerful enemy I've faced, and I've got something they don't." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose." The Montgomery Agritech temporary headquarters had been established in the penthouse suite of Willow Creek's only hotel, a 3-story structure that had seen better days, but represented the pinnacle of local accommodation. Eleanor stood at the window, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon as the storm that had been threatening all day finally approached. "The board is getting impatient," James Whitfield, her CFO, remarked from his position at the conference table. They expected the Willow Creek acquisition to proceed on schedule. "The schedule has changed," Eleanor replied without turning. "There are complications I need to address personally." "What complications?" Victor Chambers demanded, his earlier affable demeanor replaced by corporate precision. As Montgomery Agritech's regional development director, he'd been instrumental in identifying Willow Creek as a prime acquisition target. "Every property has been assessed and valued. The drought has put most local farmers in untenable positions. Black River is cooperating fully?" "Too fully, perhaps," Eleanor murmured, turning to face the room. "The interest rates Kennedy's charging border on criminal, and there are concerning patterns in which properties are being targeted for aggressive foreclosure." Chambers shifted uncomfortably. "Banking practices aren't our concern. We're simply capitalizing on market conditions." "Market conditions that appear to have been engineered," Eleanor challenged, moving to the table where satellite images of the region were spread out. "Interesting how properties in the northern aquifer zone are facing the most aggressive foreclosure terms precisely where our geological surveys indicate the highest agricultural potential." "That's business," Chambers shrugged. "Strategic acquisition." "And what about Michael Harmon's death?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Was that strategic too?" The room went silent. Richardson, standing guard by the door, straightened slightly. "I don't know what you're implying," Chambers said carefully, "but a farmer's suicide, while tragic, is hardly relevant to our acquisition strategy." Eleanor studied Chambers with new suspicion. In the week since her cliff rescue, she'd immersed herself in Willow Creek's dynamics, piecing together a troubling picture of coordinated pressure on specific landowners. The more she learned, the more she questioned Montgomery Agritech's role in what increasingly appeared to be a systematic dismantling of the local agricultural community. "I'm postponing our acquisition timeline," she announced. "I want a complete review of our partnership with Black River Financial, including all communication between our offices and theirs regarding specific properties." "That's unnecessary," Chambers protested. "We've operated within all legal and ethical boundaries." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Eleanor replied, her tone making it clear the discussion was over. "James, contact legal. I want a full audit of our Willow Creek operation." As the meeting dispersed, Chambers lingered, his expression unreadable. "This sudden concern for local farmers, it wouldn't have anything to do with your accident at Eagles Point, would it?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "My interest is in ensuring Montgomery Agritech operates ethically in all its dealings." "Of course," Chambers smiled thinly, "though I wonder if the board would share your newfound ethical concerns when they're expecting a substantial return on the Willow Creek investment." The veiled threat wasn't lost on Eleanor. As CEO, she answered to a board of directors increasingly focused on quarterly profits over long-term sustainability. Her father's vision of agricultural innovation Serving farming communities had gradually been eroded by shareholder demands and market pressures. The board hired me to make decisions, Eleanor said firmly, and I've decided we need more information before proceeding. After Chambers departed, Richardson approached. Ma'am, there's something else you should see. He handed her a tablet displaying a property record. Jack Harmon's daughter, Rachel, lost her university scholarship today. The funding was abruptly withdrawn by the Montgomery Foundation. Eleanor frowned. We don't withdraw scholarships mid-program. Who authorized this? The paperwork was processed through Chambers' office. Richardson replied, officially, it was due to budget reassessment. A cold anger settled in Eleanor's chest. The Montgomery Foundation had been her mother's legacy, a commitment to educational opportunities for rural students. Using it as leverage in a corporate land grab violated everything it stood for. Reinstate it immediately, she ordered, and find out what other pressure tactics have been employed without my knowledge. Richardson hesitated. There's one more thing. Sheriff Davis has been investigating Michael Harmon's death. He's requested the coroner re-examine the evidence. Eleanor moved to the window again, watching the approaching storm. Jack Harmon had saved her life without hesitation or expectation of reward. Now she was discovering that her own company might be complicit in the systematic destruction of everything he was fighting to preserve. Richardson, she said quietly, I need to understand exactly what's happening in Willow Creek. Not as CEO of Montgomery Agritech, but as someone who owes Jack Harmon a debt I can't repay. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the distant silhouette of the Harmon farmhouse on the horizon. The storm was coming, in more ways than one, and Eleanor was no longer certain which side she was on. The rain, when it finally came, fell with the vengeful intensity of a drought-ending downpour. Jack stood on the porch, watching water cascade from the gutters in silver sheets, transforming the parched earth into muddy rivers within minutes. In the fields, the corn that had survived would drink deeply, but much of the damage was already done. The crop would be a fraction of normal yield. Behind him, Rachel's voice rose in frustration as she argued with Martha in the kitchen. She'd arrived that morning, her anger at the scholarship cancellation compounded by Jack's refusal to let her drop out permanently to help save the farm. Your place is at school, he'd insisted. This farm isn't worth sacrificing your future. That's not your decision to make, she'd shot back, her mother's stubborn determination evident in the set of her jaw. This is my heritage too. The argument had reached an impasse, as their conversations often did. Too many years of separation, too much unspoken hurt on both sides. A vehicle's headlights cut through the rain-blurred darkness, an unfamiliar sedan navigating the muddy driveway with cautious determination. Jack tensed, one hand moving instinctively toward the small of his back, where his service pistol would have been during deployment. The car stopped, and a figure emerged, struggling with an umbrella that immediately inverted in the wind. Even through the downpour, Jack recognized Eleanor Montgomery. He stepped off the porch into the rain, meeting her halfway. Kind of late for a property assessment, he called over the storm's roar. Eleanor abandoned the useless umbrella. I need to talk to you, she shouted back, rain plastering her hair to her face. It's important, Jack hesitated, then nodded toward the barn. This way. The barn's interior was dry and smelled of hay and machine oil, a scent unchanged since Jack's childhood. He flipped on the lights, antiquated fluorescence flickering to life to reveal the orderly workspace where 3 generations of Harmons had maintained their equipment. Eleanor stood dripping on the concrete floor, looking simultaneously out of place in her expensive clothing and oddly at home in her direct, unaffected demeanor. You know who I am, she stated rather than asked. Eleanor Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Agritech, Jack confirmed, tossing her a clean shop towel. The company that's partnering with Black River to force farmers into foreclosure so you can buy their land at pennies on the dollar. Eleanor's expression registered surprise, then understanding. That's what you think I'm doing here. Aren't you? Jack challenged. Your security team has been photographing my property. Your company opened a credit line with the bank that's foreclosing on my farm, and suddenly my daughter's Montgomery Foundation scholarship gets canceled. Quite a coincidence. That's why I'm here, Eleanor said, meeting his gaze directly. I didn't know about the scholarship. I've already ordered it reinstated. Jack's surprise must have shown on his face because Eleanor continued with greater urgency. There are things happening within my company that I wasn't aware of. Actions being taken that don't align with our stated values. Corporate values, Jack echoed skeptically. Convenient principles until they interfere with profit. A flash of anger crossed Eleanor's features. My father built Montgomery Agritech to help farmers, not destroy them. He believed agricultural technology should serve communities, not replace them. And what do you believe? Jack asked, studying her intently. The question seemed to catch Eleanor off guard. For a moment, the corporate mask slipped, revealing uncertainty beneath the confident exterior. I believed I was leading the company according to those principles, she finally said. Now I'm not so sure. The rain hammered on the metal roof, filling the silence between them. Jack had interrogated enough people in combat situations to recognize genuine doubt when he saw it. Why are you here, Ms. Montgomery? He asked, his tone less confrontational. To warn you, she replied, and to understand what's really happening in Willow Creek. Before Jack could respond, the barn door burst open. Rachel stood framed in the doorway, rain dripping from her jacket. Dad, she called urgently. Betty's place is on fire. The diner, they're saying it was deliberate. Jack was already moving, grabbing his rain gear from a hook by the door. Call Sheriff Davis, he instructed Rachel. Tell him we need emergency services. Already on their way, Rachel replied. But the volunteer fire department is stretched thin with flooding on the east side. Eleanor stepped forward. I can help. My security team includes former first responders. Jack assessed her briefly, then nodded. Follow us. The drive to town was treacherous. Rain-slicked roads challenging even Jack's experienced handling. Eleanor followed in her sedan, already on the phone coordinating resources. When they arrived at the diner, flames were visible through the windows despite the downpour, smoke billowing into the night sky. Betty stood across the street, restrained by neighbors as she tried to rush toward the burning building. My home, she cried, gesturing to the apartment above the diner. Everything I own is in there. The volunteer fire department had arrived but was clearly overwhelmed, their aging equipment struggling against the blaze. Jack immediately took charge, his military training kicking in as he organized bystanders into a bucket brigade to support the firefighters' efforts. Eleanor's security team arrived minutes later, Richardson efficiently deploying his men to assist. Eleanor herself joined the bucket line, designer clothing forgotten as she worked alongside Willow Creek residents to save a local landmark. Second fire this month, Sheriff Davis said grimly, appearing beside Jack as they paused to catch their breath. First the Alvarado barn, now this. Betty spoke to Eleanor Montgomery about Michael yesterday, Jack replied, the connection clear. Someone's sending messages. Davis nodded toward where Eleanor was working tirelessly in the bucket line. Including to her, looks like. For hours they fought the fire, eventually containing it enough to save the structure, though the interior was severely damaged. As dawn broke, the rain finally slackened, revealing the extent of the night's destruction. Betty sat on a nearby bench, a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the charred remains of her livelihood. Eleanor approached her hesitantly. Ms. Williams, I'm so sorry about your diner. Betty looked up, recognition dawning. You're that writer who was asking questions yesterday. Not exactly, Eleanor admitted. My name is Eleanor Montgomery. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Agritech. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Jack watched as confusion, then anger crossed Betty's face. You people are buying up all our farms, she accused, destroying our community. That's not, Eleanor began, but was cut off by Victor Chambers' voice. It's exactly what they're doing, Chambers said, striding toward the group. Despite the early hour, he was immaculately dressed, seemingly untouched by the night's chaos. Montgomery Agritech has been systematically targeting Willow Creek Farms for acquisition. Eleanor turned to face him, her expression hardening. What are you doing here? Victor. I heard about the fire, he replied smoothly. Came to offer assistance. At 5 a.m., Jack questioned, his suspicion evident. Before the news would have reached anyone outside town, Chambers faltered momentarily. I have local contacts who keep me informed. I bet you do, Sheriff Davis said, stepping forward. Interesting timing. These accidents happening to people who oppose your development plans? Are you accusing me of something? Sheriff Chambers demanded, indignation replacing his usual charm. Not yet, Davis replied calmly. But I'm starting to see patterns. Eleanor moved to stand beside Jack, addressing the gathered townspeople directly. I came to Willow Creek to assess potential agricultural investments. What I found is troubling on multiple levels. I promise you, Montgomery Agritech does not condone intimidation, coercion, or destruction of property. Pretty word, Betty scoffed. But your company's still working with Black River to force foreclosures? That relationship is under review, Eleanor stated firmly. Effective immediately. Chambers' expression darkened. You don't have authority to make that decision unilaterally. As CEO, I absolutely do, Eleanor countered. And I'm exercising that authority now. The confrontation was interrupted by Richardson, who approached Eleanor with urgent purpose. Ma'am, we've got a situation. The storm has compromised the dam at Miller's Creek. They're predicting a flash flood that will hit the northern farms within hours. Jack immediately turned to Davis. Evacuation plans. Already activating the emergency system, Davis confirmed. But with the roads flooded and crews stretched thin? I can help, Eleanor said without hesitation. Equipment, manpower, whatever you need. Jack studied her for a long moment, weighing trust against suspicion. Eleanor Montgomery was either the most convincing actor he'd ever encountered or genuinely concerned about Willow Creek's welfare. Either way, they needed all the help they could get. We'll need sandbags at the Jensen Bridge to divert water from the town, he decided, and warning teams to reach the outlying farms. Done. Eleanor nodded, already turning to Richardson with instructions. As the crowd dispersed with newfound purpose, Jack found himself working alongside the woman he'd suspected of orchestrating his farm's destruction. The irony wasn't lost on him. The cliff rescue had been straightforward compared to the murky waters they now navigated together. Why should I trust you? He asked quietly as they loaded sandbags into his truck. Eleanor paused, meeting his gaze directly. Because despite what you think, Mr. Harmon, not everything is about business. Sometimes it's about doing what's right. Something you taught me on that cliff. Before Jack could respond, Rachel called from across the street where she was coordinating volunteer assignments. Dad, Mrs. Peterson hasn't responded to the evacuation alert. Her farm is directly in the flood path. Edith Peterson, Eleanor asked. The property just north of yours. Jack nodded grimly. 82 years old and stubborn as they come, probably refusing to leave. I'm coming with you, Eleanor said, her tone brooking no argument. As they climbed into Jack's truck, neither noticed Victor Chambers watching their departure with calculated interest or the brief phone call he made immediately afterward. The storm was building again as they headed toward the Peterson farm, the temporary respite giving way to renewed fury. Jack navigated the flooded back roads with grim determination, his hands steady on the wheel even as water rose around the truck's tires. Why are you really here? He asked, breaking the tense silence. In Willow Creek, the truth this time. Eleanor considered her answer carefully. Montgomery Agritech identified this region for expansion based on soil composition, water access, and existing agricultural infrastructure. The drought created an opportunity to acquire land at favorable prices. Corporate speak for, we're exploiting a crisis, Jack observed. Yes, Eleanor admitted, surprising him with her candor. That's exactly what it was. The board saw an opportunity, and I authorized the plan. She turned to look at him directly. But something doesn't add up. The pattern of foreclosures, The targeted pressures, the convenient accidents, it's too coordinated. You think someone within your company is working with outside interests? Jack concluded, the pieces falling into place. I think Victor Chambers has his own agenda, Eleanor confirmed. And I think it might involve more than just agricultural development. Before Jack could pursue this line of questioning, they rounded a bend to find the road ahead completely submerged, raging water covering what had once been pasture land. We'll have to go on foot from here, he decided, pulling the truck onto higher ground. They waded through knee-deep water, the current already strong enough to make each step treacherous. The Peterson farmhouse was visible in the distance, its lower level alarmingly close to the rising floodwaters. Edith, Jack called as they approached. Edith, it's Jack Harmon. You need to evacuate. A shotgun blast answered him, pellets striking the water several feet away. A warning shot. Go away, Edith's voice carried from an upstairs window. I'm not leaving my home for some developer to snatch up, Jack cursed under his breath. Edith, the dam's breaking. This isn't about development, it's about your safety. That's what they told the Alvarados before their barn mysteriously caught fire, she shouted back. I know what happens to abandoned properties around here. Eleanor stepped forward. Mrs. Peterson, my name is Eleanor Montgomery. I give you my word that no one will touch your property while you're gone. Montgomery. Edith appeared at the window now, shotgun still visible. As in Montgomery Agritech, the vultures trying to buy up the whole county. The same, Eleanor admitted. But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is getting you to safety. Another shotgun blast, closer this time. Stay back. The water was rising visibly now, debris carried on the current smashing against the house's foundation with alarming force. Jack assessed the situation with military precision. Edith wouldn't leave willingly, but the structure wouldn't withstand the coming flood. We need to get her out, he told Eleanor. With or without her cooperation, how she's armed and terrified. Jack's expression hardened with decision. I'm going in. The back door should be less visible from her position. Keep her attention focused here. That's too dangerous, Eleanor protested. The current is getting stronger by the minute, Jack finished, which means we don't have time to argue. Before she could object further, Jack was moving, disappearing around the side of the house. Eleanor swallowed her fear and called up to Edith, engaging her in conversation about property rights and corporate responsibility topics, guaranteed to keep the elderly woman's focus. Minutes stretched like hours as the water continued to rise, now reaching Eleanor's thighs. She maintained her position, increasingly concerned about both Jack and the structural integrity of the house as the foundation absorbed repeated impacts from flood-borne debris. A crash from inside the house was followed by Edith's startled cry and the final shotgun blast. Eleanor's heart seized with fear, but before she could move toward the house, Jack appeared at the upstairs window, Edith struggling ineffectually in his grip. The stairs are gone, he shouted down to Eleanor. We'll have to use the roof. The house groaned ominously as part of the foundation gave way, the structure tilting slightly toward the flood. Jack worked quickly, breaking the window and helping Edith onto the roof. Eleanor waited around to position herself beneath them, the water now at her waist. Jump to me, she called, bracing herself. She can't swim, Jack shouted back, and her hip. Another section of foundation collapsed, the house lurching sideways. Jack made a split-second decision, lifting the protesting Edith in a fireman's carry and carefully navigating to the edge of the roof. I'll lower her down, he called to Eleanor. Be ready. What followed was a harrowing team effort, Jack carefully lowering the terrified woman as Eleanor reached up to guide her descent. The house continued to groan and shift beneath Jack's feet as he transferred Edith's weight to Eleanor. Got her, Eleanor confirmed, supporting the elderly woman as best she could against the current. Jack prepared to jump down himself when a massive surge of floodwater slammed into the house. The entire structure shuddered, then began to collapse in on itself. Eleanor watched in horror as Jack lost his footing, tumbling backward onto the disintegrating roof. Jack, she screamed, unable to help as she struggled to keep Edith above water. The house imploded in a cacophony of splintering wood and rushing water. Jack disappeared beneath the debris, the flood claiming the Peterson homestead in a matter of seconds. Eleanor stood frozen in shock, still supporting Edith but unable to tear her eyes from the destruction. No one could have survived that collapse. Then, a splash and gasping breath, Jack surfaced several yards downstream, bloodied but alive, fighting against the current with practiced strokes. Eleanor found herself laughing with relief, even as tears mixed with the rain on her face. Together, they managed to get Edith to higher ground, where Richardson and a rescue team had finally arrived. As paramedics attended to the elderly woman, Jack and Eleanor collapsed side by side on the muddy ground, exhaustion claiming them both. "So," Jack said after a moment, his voice hoarse, "still think Willow Creek is a good investment opportunity?" Eleanor turned her head to look at him, taking in his mud-covered form and the laceration above his eyebrow that was still seeping blood. "It certainly has some unexpected attractions," she replied with a small smile. Something shifted between them in that moment, a mutual recognition that transcended CEO and farmer, rescuer and rescued. Whatever happened next, they were now bound together by more than circumstance or business interests. The moment was broken by Richardson's urgent approach. "Ms. Montgomery, there's a situation at the hotel. Your room has been broken into. Files are missing." Jack and Eleanor exchanged a look of shared understanding. The stakes had just been raised again. "We need to talk," Eleanor said to Jack, her expression grave. "About Montgomery Agritech, Black River Financial, and what really happened to your brother." Jack nodded, the soldier's focus returning to his features. "First, we save the town. Then we find out who's really pulling the strings in Willow Creek." As they rose to continue the flood fight, neither noticed the distant figure watching through high-powered binoculars or the phone call that would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. The storm that had threatened to destroy Willow Creek was only the beginning. The real tempest was yet to come. The rains finally came to Willow Creek, washing away dust but not memories. What began as a simple rescue on a crumbling cliff edge had revealed fault lines running deeper than anyone imagined through corporations, communities, and calcified hearts long closed to possibility. A farmer who returned to bury his brother found himself unearthing truth instead. A billionaire who built empires of innovation rediscovered the foundations her father had intended. Both warriors in different uniforms, fighting battles they never expected to share. The land remains scarred but resilient, like those who choose to stand upon it. Some buildings couldn't be saved. Some wounds won't fully heal. The corporate letterhead now bears different signatures, and morning coffee is served at a rebuilt diner where questions are asked more openly than before. They don't speak of victory. These two who walked through fire to find each other, they know too well how fragile such things can be. Instead, they talk of stewardship of land, of legacy, of the time we're given, of second chances that arrive in the most unexpected moments. Perhaps that's the truest measure of rescue, not merely being pulled from edges of cliffs, but from the precipices we create within ourselves, where we stand alone until someone brave enough shows us another way forward.